Hi, all. Kinsey Schofield here. Had some technical difficulties with my last episode with Christopher Andersen. So here is a clean re-upload. Thank you so much for your patience, and I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Love the British monarchy? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the To Die For Daily Podcast with Kinsey Schofield. Take it away, Kinsey.
All right, thanks so much for listening to the To Die For Daily Podcast. I'm here with Christopher Andersen. You've become a friend of mine. I'm so grateful to consider you a friend, and you've been so kind to me. I listened to the book for the 710th time. I just can't tell you how many times I've listened and read to the day Diana died. It's coming out a special edition ebook for the 25th anniversary. Is this Amazon specific?
Yeah, more or less. It's Kindle. It's an ebook that is more readily available as a Kindle or an ebook on Amazon. Yes.
I love it. I was trying to explain to a friend of mine why this is my favorite Diana book, and the only thing I could really say is I felt like I was walking in grief with Prince Charles, and for the first time in my life, because there's a very clear line driven. Prince Charles and Camilla, bad guys. Princess Diana, the victim. And so for the very first time, I really, truly sympathized with Prince Charles throughout this book. I don't know how you did that, but it was magic. And and as somebody that is critical of him, I really felt it was so powerful.
I'm glad you've seen that you can be both.
Yes.
You can be understanding and of course, I mean, this is the mother of his sons. And I spoke to, and was a great thing to be able to do, to talk to the people who took care of her body. But first of all, of course, to the doctor who treated her in the tunnel and the people who tried to save her life and everything. But the real grabber was these nurses and the priest who gave her the last rites, and all these people who were there trying to cope with with something that had happened only moments earlier that we're talking about 25 years later. Right. I mean, it was quite, and those insights, and they never shared those insights again. A lot of those people, they never spoke again. The lady who ran the nursing station there, the people who reported to me about how, as you said, Charles, I mean, his first, they prepared her body and she's there, and he stands in the doorway and he almost passes out from the impact, because among the many eerie things that happened was that the air conditioning had been turned on and her hair was being blown, and she looked very lifelike. So, again, all of these little details, I think, make the story come alive.
Absolutely. One thing that stood out to me also was how important it was for Prince Charles to find her earring. That is what a unique detail, right?
Right. And then to find it much, much later, embedded in the dashboard of the car.
Yeah. I think it was 7 weeks. It was a very long time, but the fact that was on his mind, that it was important for her to look her best, and so he wanted to have her jewelry on. I thought that was really sweet. He had lilies delivered to her room. Another one of the details you mentioned that has stuck with me since the very first time I read the book was that they placed her in a blue room because someone said that they thought that was her favorite color. This was a horrific incident, but that was special, right?
Right. Everybody was paying great attention to the smallest detail. And of course, Paul Burrell was there, and he was fetching the dress that she would wear in her coffin. The coffin had another odd detail, was that it had an open lid, a kind of a glass window. So you could see, even when they closed the coffin, there she was. The feeling of grief that was felt by the French people was quite astounding. I mean, there was remember Beatrice Humbert, who was the head nurse. She said she was looking at, staring down with the most beautiful and famous face in the world, and she thought at any moment those eyes had to open. I think in trying to recreate what happened to her and the irony, one irony upon another over the course of her life and the circumstances leading up to her death. quite a story to have to tell.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the coffin, so I'm glad you brought that up. Paul specifically had said that she had envisioned at the time of her death that she wanted to have a window so
Right.
that her face, so I don't know if she was claustrophobic or if she felt that, people might want to see her, but that was one of her specific wishes. If it was her wish that that people be able to see her, or that she have access to to people or to the outside world, do you think that she would be happy where she's buried today? I always am so fearful that she's lonely.
I think a lot of people feel that way because it was that is a lonely spot, that island in the middle of the lake at Alter, and again they didn't want another Graceland on their hands. They didn't want people flocking around her grave. But I'm not so sure that isn't something she wouldn't have appreciated. I think you're right. I think she would have liked to have been in the middle of things. In a sense, that statue that was just unveiled not that long ago. Really, I'm not a huge fan. I don't think it had captured her magic at all. But that's the only thing that's really there to remind, and it's stuck away. There isn't really a great monument to her in the city of London. I think that's really quite tragic. There
Do
should be.
you do you think that they would ever move her body so that she could have that, grand, place in one of those historic churches or something? I, I just don't imagine that. I feel like it's such a lonely forever place.
It is, and I think people feel that when they visit it. I don't. I don't think the royal family has still come to grips with the impact that she had. I think there still is a simmering resentment among defenders of Charles and in that camp. And I again am still quite critical of him. I know. I mean, you always ask yourself, what would Diana think if she were alive today? She'd be 61 years old, and I think she'd be delighted that her sons are happily married, and she has wonderful grandchildren, and the boys have both found great purpose in their lives. And of course, William and she would have loved both wives, I'm quite certain. But there has to be great sorrow over the fact that this rift has occurred, and that Harry, has such. Harry and Meghan has been cast out in a sense. That we all see it, and I don't think it's anything she would have ever anticipated. So, the way things have evolved, who could have predicted it? But we're talking about the 25th anniversary. I have been covering the royal family for 50 years, and I can remember all those years when no one, when everyone wondered when would Charles finally find someone and marry her, and Diana was never on the horizon. Of course, she was so young.
Yeah.
So she really did transform everything. She transformed the nature of celebrity itself, really, I think.
Well, I was going to. This was actually at the top of my list, but I skipped it.
I'm sorry, I'm a rambler.
Oh, no, no, I love it. No, it was at the top of my list, and I'm glad you said that because it's bringing me back to it. Is Diana's death the worst thing that has ever happened to this British royal family?
Oh, well, I think a lot of people would have thought maybe Wallace Simpson was the worst thing.
Right? Or Andrew.
Or Andrew, yes. It was certainly the cataclysmic event. It almost brought the monarchy down. People forget there were so many missteps on the part of the Queen and other members of the royal family. And Charles really did save the day. I have to hand that to him, that he really whipped everybody into shape and made sure that Diana got the respect that she deserved. But it was a close call. The people were angry at the Queen, very.
And then some other books I've read, it almost sounded like senior royal members of the family were resentful of Diana's death. It inconvenienced them. Did you ever feel that way as you were researching this?
Absolutely. I think you still get that sense, and of course those people that are, on Team Camilla and Charles, they have never stopped portraying Diana as a hopeless neurotic. Now, she did have problems. I will say that she was driven to them by the behavior of the other royals in the family. She became manipulative because she had to survive, I think. And but that they still hold a grudge, and it's very visible. And I think it's unfortunate that this is all lost now in this battle between the brothers, because that's what people think about. and not enough attention is paid to Diana and what she would have wanted, and she would have wanted them to find a way to come together or work together.
Well, because sometimes Prince Harry, his actions lean more towards that Spencer blood, it feels like, you know?
Well, it's no coincidence that he ended up in Montecito, and Dodie had purchased that Julie Andrews' old mansion in Malibu, and she intended to live in California a big chunk of the time. She would have understood his need to get away and do that, but I don't think she would have wanted him to exit the. I don't think he intended, of course, to completely exit the family and give up all of his military honors and that sort of thing. And he's still, everyone's waiting to see what uh, awaits in his memoir. That's going to be such another. It has to be full of bombshells. Let's face it. And the rest of the royals, who knows what their reaction is going to be? Not going to be good.
You mentioned Dodie, and one thing that was also really compelling about the day Diana died is you kind of, I mean, it's heartbreaking to think that once she died, Dodie's father almost instantly had everybody pack up her belongings in the Ritz and ship them out. So Diana is laying there nude on the table. They're getting her, they're doing her hair. They're just trying to make her presentable, but they come to the realization that she has nothing to wear, and it's panic mode for a while because they're trying to find clothing to put the most famous, the most significant woman in the world. They want to honor her. They don't want her to be in this position. What were Muhammad's motives there? Is he just is he so frustrated and acting out of desperation? I mean, why just pack up her stuff and ship it out? It kind of it put people in a difficult position.
Right. I think. Well, I think he was so angry with the British royal family for all the obvious reasons. He'd been shunned by society his entire. He desperately wanted to be accepted, and he did feel from the get go that his son had been, along with Diana, had been the victims of a conspiracy to murder them.
Wow.
And I think he was so full of rage and confusion and grief, understandably, that being the man of action that he always has been, he just said, clean it up and ship it back. He wanted to kind of sever his own, any kind of emotional, he didn't want to look as if he was playing the Royals game, I think. By the way, the wife of the British ambassador who came up with the dress, so there was a lot of scrambling going on but yes, it was a time of just massive confusion. And of course, Muhammad Al Fayed, Dodi's dad, still thinks his son was murdered. I think there's no doubt that they were the victims of a drunk driving accident. Again, Henri Paul, the driver of the car, I talk about him and his situation in the book in great detail, and there was no question that he was, impaired to the max. And he was coping with his own grief. He'd had a breakup with a young woman that he'd been involved with for a long time, and that he was kind of coping with his own emotional problems. And unfortunately, that's the way he did it, and got behind the wheel of a car. I wondered why the royal family never tried to make a social point about drunk driving or about wearing your seatbelt, which Diana always did, but in this one case, she let down her guard. No effort was ever made to capitalize on, yes, it was a great tragedy, but it was the kind of tragedy that showcased a big problem, and that was getting and drunk and getting behind the wheel, no matter what the circumstance. Nobody ever attempted that. That always kind of surprised me. Over the years, somebody might have done something.
I thought that too, and within the last few years, Prince Harry said something in an interview, and I do understand that he really, firmly believes that the paparazzi had a. I mean, it sounds like he feels like they are solely involved, or solely to blame, I should say, for the death of his mother. But I often think that when he does lash out at the press or bring up his mother, I often think we have got to remember that there was also a lack of a seatbelt and alcohol involved. Two things that are just, I mean, deadly, absolutely deadly.
Right, alcohol, and by the way, all sorts of antidepressants and sedatives and whatnot. I mean, he was Henri Paul before he got behind the wheel of the car. We all have there's that famous video of Diane in the basement of the There was
Yeah.
in the revolving door, and with Henri Paul there as well, the driver. But he was literally bouncing off the walls. I talked to witnesses who saw him and thought that it was astonishing that he could even walk, much less drive a car. But of course, Harry is very angry, and as is William. They're furious at the press. They bought into this notion that she was hunted down to her death by the ravenous British tabloid, the you know. Gangs. But the fact of the matter is that there was more to it than just that. And the person who survived the crash, of course, happened to have been wearing a seatbelt. There's some debate about that, but I'm convinced he was, and that was the bodyguard.
Can you tell me about the process of researching for this book? Because I just thought you did have an unbelievable access to people. And I mean, the access you have to people completely paints this picture. You are there, you are in the moment, and you are transported to this place. And I was fascinated by how long did this take you? Who all did you talk to? And did you walk away from the experience feeling any different about Diana?
Well, I can remember, like everyone else, and I do talk about it in the book, how I learned about it. We had a dinner party here, and as we were leaving, my 16-year-old daughter, Kate, who is now a best-selling author in her own right, Kate Anderson Brower, but she comes down and says, Princess Diana's been in this accident, and I think she's dead. Well, of course, we just thought they were wrong. But people filed out of this house in stunned. They weren't. They hadn't reached the stage where they could yet weep about it, which everyone ended up doing eventually. But I knew right away. I had been writing books about. At that point, I think I've written 35 books, and 18 of them were New York Times bestsellers. But who's counting? But at that point, I'd done a number of biographies. But this one I thought was, I got on the phone to my agent, who was in Japan on a train. And she got off the train. We talked on the phone. It was before people had cell phones, and I said this story has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. Well, memories are fresh, and people are there, and I flew to London. I went to Paris, interviewed, as I said. I think the people who are the eyewitnesses are often the people, they're often people whose names you don't know. Again, nurses, doctors, chauffeurs, security guards, and whatnot. The people who saw what happened, people who had been standing there and witnessed the crash, and they could paint the picture. And then, of course, I did it myself. I drove where she drove. I, tried to. I talked to people about the circumstances surrounding the mob scene in front of the hotel, and it was painting the picture that I thought was important. It really, in my opinion, it's a thriller, in a sense. Now, it's a mystery and a thriller. It's still a tremendous suspense, and there are revelations still popping up now and then, there was recently, people have talked about this, and I've written about this in the past, but, she was at one point so confused and bewildered about what was happening in the royal family that she convinced herself that not only would she be assassinated to make way for another queen or another person in Charles's life, but that Camilla would be, and that the person who would then be elevated to the wife of the Prince of Wales would be the nanny, then Tiggy Burke. Well, that of course was nonsense, but that's how strange the stories became and things became in Diana's head at one point. But again, I think she was gaslighted.
Well, yeah, and Martin Bashir didn't help any of that.
No, he didn't. He really made her feel that things were going on that weren't going on. But in fairness, I have to say that Panorama interview, people can talk about the way it was obtained, but it was a marvelous opened a window into the life of this woman and the institution of the monarchy. No one has really contested what she said. Everything she said in that interview is absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have trouble getting anyone to talk to you because it was people really felt, I still have people that want to be like, you have to understand, the press is different than the paparazzi. So I think that that's always been a topic that has confused people. And so did you have trouble getting people to want to talk to you because they felt like you, as a member of the press, had somehow been associated with this?
I think there was, and I've written about John F. Kennedy Jr., who had to cope with similar treatment. Jackie, I actually,
I love your JFK Jr. books. Oh my God. Oh
but
my God.
I met John and Jackie as well. Because I had her. She was an editor at Doubleday when I wrote a book for them, and I remember when I first spoke to her. She walked in the room, and I always say it was like Mount Rushmore walking in the room. She was just larger than life in every way, but and a great and incredibly intelligent woman. No surprise there. But getting back to
Oh,
the
wait, no, whoa, don't get back. Don't get back. I have a question then. Is it true that she did not like Diana?
well, I think she felt that Diana was making too much of a fuss. You got to remember that Jackie played the game.
Mm-hmm.
She she knew what was going on in John's life and in JFK's life, and she wasn't going to. Uh, as long as she felt that she was not publicly humiliated,
Right.
he could exist.
And that
Right.
was a totally different world where the media knew and they kept his secrets because I
Right.
don't know, it was just a different world back then.
Right. Well, I remember interviewing. It's funny how they kept. I remember interviewing all of JFK's what they call the kitchen cabinet and his cabinet, but Ted Sorensen and Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and Pierre Salinger, and they insisted for years to me personally that they just didn't know a thing. Well, of course they knew. Eventually, they had to confess up, but they convinced themselves, that. It's funny the kind of self-delusion that goes on when you're trying to keep everything together like that. But the
Right.
problem with Diana was that she just blew the whistle on everybody, and really, that was not the kind of thing that Jackie. But I have to say the other way around. Diana admired Jackie tremendously, and Jackie approached her to do her memoirs for Doubleday. When Jackie was editor at Doubleday, and ironically, she would go and get celebrities and try to get them to sign up with Doubleday. And Diana said no, but she regretted it. She felt she didn't regret that decision, but she felt bad that she'd have to turn Jackie down. She thought Jackie was a model mother, and she always said, I hope that William, in particular, can grow up to be the kind of gracious person that JFK Jr. became, and
I
he
think
really
he has. Don't
yeah,
you?
yes, I absolutely. I think William and Kate. I mean, boy, I know that Diana would be thrilled because they obviously have it together, and they're not happy all the time, clearly. But I definitely see them, on the throne. I'm not so happy about Camilla, but that's another story.
I mean, I've said forever because your book, I've like I said, I've read it a million times, and you always said that they weren't being truthful when they said that she was going to be princess consort. You've always said, get ready for Queen Consort Camilla, and
Right.
I cannot tell you how frustrated I was when we had the encouragement from the Queen, because it's just another one of those palace chess moves that they did to try to make us all comfortable with the idea of Queen Consort Camilla. She's earned her place, but at the
Yeah.
same time, don't lie to us. However many years ago, it was unnecessary to lie to us.
Right. I mean, when you say she earned, I see. I'm just one of those people who thinks, wow, look at how. I mean, the word scheming doesn't say it. I mean, how solicitous and sneaky. I mean, the what went on for decades. Um, for her to be sitting on the throne when Diana was deprived of it seems to me to be unfair. And not the right. I don't think the British people are happy about it either.
Oh, I when I was there for Jubilee, all of my drivers were complaining about it. Whenever they'd see me like pop in all, with all my gear on for the Jubilee, they were all like, "Well, you know what they did? They got Diana out of the way for Camilla." And I'm like, "Whoa,
Right.
that is aggressive."
I know, and they represent a huge chunk of the British public, and I think I don't think she was knocked off, but I do think that the fact that she ends up on the throne is just one of those historical twists of fate that I find incredibly frustrating and
Right.
sad.
Especially knowing that her was is it her great grandmother that had an affair with
Yes,
Charlie? It's like
yeah,
that's just this is all very incestuous.
Alice Keppel. Well, that was the other thing too, because I interviewed a number of the people who grew up with Camilla, and one of them was the actress Lynn Redgrave, who went to the same passed away since, but she went to the same school, and they all remember that even as a little girl, she bragged. I mean, 10 years old, and she's bragging about her great great grandmother Alice Keppel, who was the king's mistress, and she said she was going to follow in her great grandmother's footsteps. That I find, wow, that shows how long she had this in her mind.
Oh, she manifested that.
Yes, absolutely, it happened. Yeah.
Something I because I we've been talking about this chat for a while, and something that I wanted to ask you was just based on how Diana was had control of a lot of things. She wanted to control the narrative. She was very savvy and she was just so smart. I mean, I know they say she wasn't book smart, but she was clearly a very intelligent woman when it comes to I'm going to do this and get photographed over here because that's going to lead to this. She just understood consequences, right? Why on God's green earth did she let Dodie control that night? Dodie had all the control. He was going to go here 1 minute. He was going to go there 1 minute. Why did this woman who controlled everything and was just so bright and so considerate of consequences,
Right.
why did she just give up and let that man take control that night? That does not feel like her.
Why did JFK get behind the controls of a plane with a broken ankle? I mean, it just takes one moment, one little mistake, and that was it. And I think even down to the seatbelt, she always wore a seatbelt. And I do write in the book about how she drove around London. She was had to deal with the paparazzi on the streets of London. She could maneuver her car in such a way that she did not endanger other people or the people. Even, she was very worried about the guys on the motorcycles, the photographers. She was worried they might get hurt. So she was somebody who's very savvy and conscious about driving, and safety. But that one moment, and you're right, she let Dodie take over.
It just does not feel like her. It just is like
No,
just
no.
are you just giving up? I mean, I
Yeah,
honestly felt like too. I always felt like she would wear the pants in the next relationship because she lacked so much control in the
right.
Charles relationship. I'm going to quickly look over my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Oh, okay.
So I have you describe Diana as a woman with a mission. There's also a quote from her later in the book where she refers to herself as a messenger. So do you know what the mission was and what the message was?
I think she was, incredibly spiritual. I mean, she really was, as you know, she had gurus and astrologers and all sorts of advisors in that area. And I think she felt that she would never. She said, "I'll never be queen." I
Hmm.
think she felt like an intermediary. That she was somebody who was going to bring a new, and in a sense, she had bring a whole new dimension to the monarchy and shove them forward. I mean, I just recall, but prior to her setting foot on the stage, the monarchy was a drab institution that was going nowhere. I mean, people aren't really talking about the other, who's talking about well, I was going to say the Emperor of Japan, but I guess maybe now they are. But the thing is, it was something that we saw, getting more and more irrelevant, and I
Yes.
wanted to change that, and she did in a big way, and her sons are just keeping that going. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Kate. When she gets criticized, I don't understand it at all. I think she's done an amazing job, and she stuck it out, all those years. Hooray for
I know
her.
I have a hard time with any criticism of her too, especially when there is comparisons about negative paparazzi attention with I mean I have not been there every second with Meghan Markle, but it does feel like Catherine got such much more abusive, horrible treatment from the paparazzi than Meghan Markle's ever received.
Oh, absolutely. She was, and this is all that time when when William refused to commit, as they say, 7 Was it 7 years? I think it was 7 years.
I think
10
it
years.
was, I thought it was 10.
10 years. I'm sorry. Yes, but it was 10 years before they got married. But I think it was about seven. It was in 2007. I was there when they broke up, and I had a book that had just closed. It was about their relationship, and we had to scramble. That was quite a lot of
Oh,
fun.
I bet.
That took everybody by surprise. They were back together within 6 weeks.
Thank
So
God. The book's
thank
back
God.
on.
That's right. That's what's important, not the future of monarchy. But yeah, no, she was, and William worried about that. And now we have the kiddies to worry about. Now we have the three. They're going to be at Lambrook School in Windsor. All three of them. I mean, of the Cambridge children. There will be, inevitably security concerns and all of that, even though they're fine. By the way, Harry is going with Meghan to, as you know, to England, and that's going to be interesting to watch because I don't think he's going to get a warm and fuzzy.
Oh
Well,
no, I don't know. I don't think so either. I'm surprised. It's like they keep going back into the danger zone. I was just saying, why go over to the UK where your reputation is taking a hit right now? Why not continue to grow your US reputation and take advantage of the fact that not a lot of people have that information about you here?
right, and she does, she's very, very popular here. And as you know, not so much in England. As a matter of fact, she's wildly unpopular in England and dragging Harry's popularity down there. But I agree. I think that store up all the goodwill while you can, because other things are coming down the pike, as you said. And it does work that way. You have to really take advantage of the positive vibes that are out there now. And I think by not doing that, you're right.
Oh, I'm worried for her. I'm worried for our girl. Um,
For all of them, frankly.
yeah, exactly. Oh, you know what else? This is my last note, and then I'll leave you alone. I thought it was really interesting that you said during Earl Spencer's eulogy that Hillary Clinton audibly gasped when he got to the part about protecting the children and raising them in the Spencer way. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, she was a huge fan of Diana's, and as you may recall, both of the Clintons were incredibly touched by what happened, and I think they were very sympathetic to Diana the entire time. But also, she understood what it meant to run even under those circumstances, for the Queen and the royal family to be put on a spot the way they were. The Queen actually bowed to Diana's coffin as it passed her on the way to Westminster, and unprecedented, unprecedented. But she had to. That's how much. And she's very. It's very hard to get her to do much, anything that's out of the ordinary or unprecedented. But she was read the riot act. If you don't show the people that you respect this woman and that you're somewhat sorry for your behavior up until this point, it's going to be a rocky road ahead. So she did what she had to do.
Oh, and do you think that I read recently that Earl Spencer said that they did not have an influence over the boys' upbringing the way that he intended?
Did that surprise me? Not at all. I mean, because right away the royal family made a huge effort to separate the kids from Diana's friends, from Spencer's. That was painfully obvious. And
And
so
did that hurt the boys, do you think, in the long run?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that they have to cope with this world and they had to be raised in that world. I think Charles turned out to be a pretty good father. I mean, he was never, both boys have said that because of everything that was going on all the time, neither Diana or Charles were as available to them as they would have liked.
Right.
Although obviously Diana had more of an influence on them. So I don't know that would have made such a difference, but still, it said so much about the royal family, that their intention really was to pretty much erase Diana's influence on the boy.
That is where I really sympathize with Prince Harry because she was such a being of love she radiated.
Right.
There's a quote in your book that she says, when I cup someone's face that's in agony, or when I cup somebody's face that's hurting,
Right.
while I am giving them, some sort of comfort, they're also giving me comfort.
That-
And that is a special kind of human being. And to have that ripped from you and really be stuck with people that we have never seen be affectionate whatsoever, I imagine that is hard to process. And I do think that is where Meghan Markle, that's her strength with Prince Harry. I imagine that she's incredibly loving and comforting to him.
Right. I mean, she's not kind of cold and aloof, but don't look at the backgrounds of these people. Look at the childhoods of the Queen and particularly Charles. I mean, they were not brought up with a whole lot of affection. Although we now see Charles being somewhat affectionate to his mother and constantly praising her at these various ceremonies.
Mummy. Yeah.
Our dearest mummy. But he also, in adulthood, talked about how icy cold both of his parents were toward him. His father was even bullying and abusive. Now you don't hear that anymore,
Yep.
but that was the way he was raised. And so you end up. This is the product you end up with. Someone I think who's very emotionally damaged, and he's carrying that. He's very repressed and silly.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It is a special edition ebook that's available on Amazon, The Day Diana Died, and it is hands down, my favorite Diana book. I have read it 1,000,000 times, and no, it's just something about being transported to this place and feeling like you're there. It's magical, and I am so grateful that you wrote this book.
Thank you. And it was a great privilege to have written it. I won't say I don't have a favorite book, but it certainly is up there.
Well, I do.
Okay.
But are you going to work on? Are you releasing anything else soon? Royal related, unroyal related? Like you said, you've had 1,000,000 New York Times bestsellers, so obviously, I imagine you don't get a lot of sleep when you're a workhorse like that.
Well, I'm trying to, cutting back a tad, but seriously, I do have actually one book that's sort of waiting to be released, but it's not yet ready.
Okay. Well, are you gonna tell me when it's ready to talk
Sure.
about?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You got my email. All right. Well, I love you so much. Thank you so much for talking to me, and I will talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the To Die For Daily Podcast with Kinsey Schofield. A transcript of this chat is available at todiefordaily.com. Please subscribe to hear more from your favorite royal commentators. Cheers.